Tonight on the Goblin's Corner,
Time periods.
Part 1.
That's how we roll. 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 That's how we roll.
Welcome to the Goblin's Corner. My name is Eric.
And I'm Matt.
And tonight,
We're doing time periods.
yeah,
Part
wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey time stuff.
Oh, yeah.
This is something that's been brewing in our brains for the last couple of weeks.
Sure.
We've been considering ways that you can use various elements, thematic and trope-wise, to create new and exciting campaigns. And what's the easiest thing to do but set it in a different time period?
Yeah.
So we're going to show you, this is actually part 1 of, I think, 3, is
Yeah.
it? Because we can't, too much time to do time.
Indeed.
And so we're going to show you guys how to do different story elements in games, regardless of the game, in a different time period. But before we get to that,
We have a question of the week.
that's right. So hit me. What we got?
All right. Well, since we're time hopping, if you could time travel
Mm-hmm.
with no fear of corrupting timelines or what have you,
All right. Any place I could go at any point in time.
sure. What readily available item to now would you bring with you?
Just one?
I mean, you've not succeeded in doing one before, so
I'm going to do 3.
3. Okay.
This is my standard answer to everything.
Sure.
It's a 6-pack, a chainsaw, and a tow truck. Because you can solve every problem with a 6-pack, a chainsaw, and a tow truck. Think about it, guys. But if I were to only to pick one item whatsoever,
Mm-hmm.
it would be soap.
So
Because I'd like to keep clean.
I understand that. I, on the other hand, know how to make soap. So
Well, good for you. I don't.
I don't have to bring that one with me.
I'd have to bring the Irish Spring with me or whatever it is.
Sure.
So what is it? Okay, so same question to you then. You get 3 items and then you get to pick one, which is different from that.
All right. Ooh.
Man,
3
I'm
items.
Making him
All right.
think now. Look at him. Look at the face. The smoke's starting to come out of the ears.
So for 3 items, I think you could go with a backpack,
Mm-hmm.
duct tape, and a bottle of high-proof booze.
I'm down with all 3 of those as well.
Because
I would actually, instead of the 6-pack, probably do the high proof booze because I'm not as a big beer drinker, but other people are. So see, that's the
the
strategy.
bribery portion.
Yeah, the strategy element of that. What's the one thing you would take?
It's a tough call. Probably a titanium knife.
That also is much more useful than soap. Because a titanium knife, handy weapon. You can use it for whatever.
It's true.
I'm just going to take a dinosaur tooth and carve it into some kind of fist weapon that I wrap around my knuckles and punch dinosaurs to death. You should, right?
You do that.
I will do that. Have you ever punched a dinosaur to death? Write to us, info@goblinscorner.com, or you can reach me, Eric, at goblinscorner.com,
Or me, Matt, at goblinscorner.com.
and of course, you can find us on all the things,
It's true.
all that stuff. So, while we're talking about time, why are we talking time periods, Matt?
Well, there's a fairly simple answer, which is not all games take place in the same time period. And we discuss games, so obviously we, at some point in time, needed to discuss time periods.
It's a good point.
Plus, we wanted to discuss a couple ideas that might not be readily apparent for time periods.
We're talking tropes and how to mix and match those tropes.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, before we get into anything, it should be noted,
Disclaimer time.
we've got some disclaimers here. Disclaimer number 1. We are a bunch of idiots. We're professional idiots, I would say, in many ways.
Sure.
But we're a bunch of idiots. We are not historians.
Right. We are storytellers.
We're storytellers, not historians. Please note
historians.
this. So when we say some things that don't make any sense, that's because it doesn't make any sense. If we're talking about barbarians running around with dinosaurs, it doesn't mean that we believe that barbarians are running around with dinosaurs.
Fair. Yeah.
They can in your campaign.
Sure.
But
But
not
we are aware that humans did not coincide with dinosaurs.
That's correct.
We know that.
Except for Loch Ness.
Sure.
All right.
And the one that's rumored to be in the Congo and the Amazon.
Yeah, except for those. I mean, those totally exist.
Clearly.
I've watched Ancient Aliens. All right. Part 2.
This is from a Western perspective.
Yep.
Because we don't know enough about other perspectives to be correct. And we would rather be correct in what we do have than be wrong with somebody else's culture.
We're going to be wrong with this stuff anyway.
Right. But there's a difference between being wrong about ourselves and being wrong about other people.
That's a good point. Yeah. So we're going to be wrong anyway. But if you are right about stuff that we don't know about, please hit us up.
Yeah.
We'd love others' perspective as well. We don't know enough about them. And again, we're not historians. See part 1, right?
Yeah.
Part 3. History is full of nasty, nasty times, nasty topics, right? Lots of wars, lots of torture, slavery. There's all kinds of other terrible things. Plagues. Yeah. Cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria, right? All kinds of nasty stuff. Anything that happens in these time periods should be suggested to your players. Session 0, this stuff.
Yeah.
Because some of the stuff is violent, and some people don't want to play with that kind of violence, right? Some of the stuff is dehumanizing. People don't want to play with that kind of stuff, right? Look, this is a fantasy game that we're talking about, or even a sci-fi game. Whatever the game you're playing, it's a game, and it should be fun. And if these aspects of history are not fun to your players, guess what you can do?
Ignore them.
Or get rid of them.
Yeah.
Just edit them out. It's your game.
Yep.
So think about that. We might touch on some of these things lightly, but if you want to go grimdark, you want all that stuff, go for it, right? It is up to you and your players to make the story that you want.
Makes sense.
Now, part 4.
These are generalities.
Yes.
Feel free to mix and match these categories up as much as you see fit. Realistically, every fantasy setting is a combination of time periods and categories. Go crazy. We're taking tropes from history and helping you build a better game world.
So a good example of that is the Forgotten Realms is very much an Iron Age style technology campaign, right?
In places.
But in other places, it's more Agrarian Age or Age of Heroes, the type stuff.
Bronze Age.
Yeah,
it even touches into the Renaissance in places.
Yeah, so it's kind of all over the place. Whereas Eberron might be more of a Renaissance fantasy style.
And it's even Renaissance moving into the Industrial Age.
Very true.
Yeah.
And so you can mix and match. And of course, this is mixing, matching time periods with fantasy stuff, but there's nothing to say you can't have a sci-fi adventure game that takes everybody back in time.
Sure.
Just because it's science fiction doesn't mean has to be like far science fiction.
It's true. Plus, Star Trek did it.
Yes. Well, Star Trek did a lot of things. So we've got some basic categories that define, in our view, what these different historical periods are.
Sure.
So we've got a couple of them, right? So we've got obviously society, because what was the society like?
Right. How many people were what and where?
Yeah. What kind of technology, which is probably one of the things that you're going to probably focus on.
Right. And for technology, we're discussing tools and such, like what was available to them.
Weapons or just the technology they had at the time. And then you have a category as well for science. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So that is what was being studied or what was being learned.
So architecture versus houses.
Correct.
Okay, got it. And then the religions, because that's important as well.
Sure.
Art.
Art has been important from the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Some would say that's the most important thing. My art history professors would, in fact. Magic, because there's going to be magic in there.
Sure. Politics.
Mm-hmm. Because politics.
Right. And just themes for the time period.
Yeah. So we've got some thematics that you can maybe throw in. Now, these basic categories, in addition to the time periods, can be mixed and matched. So you could have different politics with a different time period. For example.
Well, I mean, you could clearly have a family setting in any time period if they're in remote enough a place, right? So that's Stone Age society, the family gathering, in even modern times.
You could have a monarchy in the Stone Age or a republic in the Stone Age. Why not?
Sure.
Right? It's your game.
Yeah.
And so that's a good example of just like politics and stuff like that. Magic, of course, with the equation a little bit more.
Because that's what it's there for.
Some would say it fucks it hard because it could be, at that point, if you have magic, you could literally be in a Flintstones campaign.
Sure. You could be in a Flintstones campaign.
You really could, and someone should write that because I want to play that. That'd be awesome. Riding a Apatosaurus to work. I got my tie and my bearskin tunic.
Yeah. I want to work on a demolitions crew.
Of course you are.
So that I can ride around on my ankylosaur.
Oh yeah. You and that ankylosaur. That's how you go. All right. So think about these categories. Think about mixing them around, and then think about how they can combine in the time periods to make a good game for your players.
Sure. And speaking of the Flintstones,
let's talk about the Flintstones, the Stone Age, guys. This is also referred to in many games as the Age of Creation.
Makes sense.
And there are some games that explore this. I know World of Darkness explored this at one point with some of their, what was it called? They had a campaign where I think it was like Dark Times or something like that, where they went back in time right after the Exarchs won.
Gotcha. That must have been for Mage. I know.
It was for Mage.
Yeah, because Vampire was Vampire Dark Ages.
Mm-hmm, there was Vampire Dark Age. Well, Vampire also had a Stone Age thing too.
Mm.
It was Vampire, Werewolf, and I think Sin Eaters was in that too. I don't know. The book's over there. I just don't feel like getting it. The point is, what's going on in the Stone Age?
Well, society is simple. It's family and extended family.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there you go.
Because ostensibly, there's not a lot of people at that point.
Correct.
Now, you could have a lot of people, in which case, how would Stone Age society then change? If there's 10,000 people in the world versus
10,000 people in one place?
Yeah.
Sure.
How would you have a megalithic society? And actually, this would probably be pre-megalithic.
Yeah. You'd live in cave systems and stuff like that, theoretically.
Or you just got off the savannah.
Yeah, but how could you provide for, if you're not agrarian?
Magic.
Sure. There
it's
you go.
all about magic, brother.
There we go.
There you go.
There's your answer.
Something for people to think about. You know, people more creative than us, obviously. Technology. We've got some technology here. We've got some stone tools.
Sure.
We can use wood.
Yeah.
You
can use your tooth.
Yes, I can use my dinosaur tooth and stab things. You could have a bed of grass and burnt ash. Keeps the bugs off.
Sure.
That actually is. I looked that up, by the way. That's actually real. What else we got? We have fire, of course. The invention of fire.
You've got vines as rope.
Sure. Or even maybe potentially weaving grass into rope.
Yep. But also, you've got atlatls, which are things that you attach spears to so that you get far more mechanical force and you can throw them.
Tell people what an atlatl is before.
It's literally a stick with a notch cut in the end. And then you take a spear, you cut a notch in the end of it, you affix the spear to the atlatl, and you throw overhead at great speeds with higher mechanical force.
It's a lever for a spear.
There you go.
There you go.
Also,
bows.
Yeah. I was unaware of that until we started doing the research that we did do, that bows have been around literally since the Stone Age.
Oh, yeah. Shooting people with sticks has been a long, timely tradition of humanity.
Oh, yeah.
Now, we're only talking, obviously, about humanity.
Sure.
And really, we're kind of giving you not even the Cliff Notes version of that, but think about the creation of your game world in the Stone Age. Are there societies that are far more advanced at this time? Why not?
Yeah.
What if, I'm using like a sci-fi thing, what's left is the Stone Age version of whatever species you're playing with, because they're literally living, instead of living in caves, they're living in the ruins of a precursor civilization.
Absolutely.
Bunch of...
Like what will happen with the cephalopods if humans kill each other.
That's true. What might happen to us if we kill each other? 20,000 years go by and we're like, look at all this stuff. It's called a Game Boy. They won't be able to read that anyway. It's fine. No. Ah, well, too bad. Science. So we've talked about the technology. Tell me a little bit about the science.
Well, hunting and gathering.
Mm-hmm.
And gathering is going to be recognizing edible plants, right?
This is something we've done for a long time. Look at any civilization that, what is it like that? The people that dwell in the rainforest, right?
Yeah, the mechs.
Yeah, and they know all about the beneficial plants and stuff like that. This has been going on as far as humans have eaten plants, I would say.
Sure. Because if you eat the wrong ones, you die.
Right. It's very important to know what you eat and what kills you and doesn't kill you.
Yeah. Botany was one of the first sciences.
Yeah, so you would think there'd be at least some rudiments of that going on. I would honestly say something sophisticated.
Sure. Weather sense.
Mm-hmm.
Recognizing how plants and animals can be used to predict changes in the weather.
Because you got to get out of the rain at some point.
Yes. That's simple.
Basic survival is another one.
Yeah.
And, of course, hunting and killing.
Yeah. But recognizing safe shelter, things like that. Basic survival seems like a simple set of knowledges, but there's a lot to it.
Mm-hmm. Probably some basic trade as well. Although, again, depending upon how many people are in your game world at this time, may not be enough people to trade with. It may just be something like, if you're not using it, somebody else uses it.
Yeah.
And so the concept of trade isn't needed. So we're talking very, very early.
Yes.
And this is good even if your characters aren't playing this type of civilization. If they go back in that point, the other civilizations they encounter, how can you play with mechanics that that civilization might not understand?
That's true.
And that's a fun role-playing experience.
Yeah, if you set something down and somebody else picks it up because they need to use it, they're not stealing from you because they don't have stealing.
Mm-hmm. They're just using it because you're not using it.
Right. It's not their fault.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
Let's talk about religion.
All right. Well, burial practices date back to the Stone Age. Now, there are people who argue that that was a practice in safety, right? To keep from drawing predators or large scavengers, things like that.
Saber-toothed tiger comes and starts gnawing on your buddy who died.
Right. But there are also people who argue that there was some specific significance. We don't know. Not gonna know.
We're not anthropologists. We're not historians. Again.
And they don't even agree.
We'll see point one, right?
Right. You've got animism, ancestor worship.
Yep.
Those were the primary sources of religion at the time. That's people and place worship. And for places.
Spirits of the trees,
Yeah.
spirits of the forest.
Spirits of the rocks.
Yeah, spirits of the rocks and weather, all that kind of fun stuff. Now, when we get to magic, that'll be very interesting because that might influence the creatures that you have.
Makes sense. Let's talk about art. You're the art guy.
Well, cave paintings have been around for a long time, ever since, again, people recognized that they could make a mark with two sticks. So you're going to get a lot of that. You might get chipped stone work. You might even get collections such as shells or rocks or something as objects of beauty or even objects of worth or value.
Makes sense.
You've got a lot of options. You can, of course, expand upon that. This is what we know from history, and there's probably more. I think there's corded artwork, like beads and stuff like that. Beaded artwork and stuff was around, but I could be wrong about that. It's been a while since I took that. Early jewelry definitely existed at some point.
Right. Makes sense. Now then, magic.
All right, so drawing from tropes here, magic of nature is obviously going to be a huge thing.
Sure. And like you mentioned, depending on the setting, there may already be answers to this.
Mm-hmm.
But if not, then what we're touching on is things that would, due to human development, most likely be the most important things where magic would get developed first.
Well, and not developing the concepts for things is something that also influences how you would react to the world.
Sure.
So if you don't have a concept for travel, like moving from one place to the other without actually physically moving, you wouldn't understand that concept.
Right.
And so if you wanted to get someplace, you might increase your speed to get to that place.
Makes sense. If you're constantly fighting large vicious creatures, strength would probably be a paramount thing that you would work on.
Healing people would definitely be useful because you're going to get
hurt.
You're gonna get bit by something. You gotta med up, right? Better senses.
Sure.
And of course, the common trope on a lot of this stuff is, oh, he becomes the coyote or the tiger or whatever, and you might exhibit some of that animalism trait.
Sure.
But that's not necessary for the game. If you want to play that game, sure. Which you could.
Yeah. You could end up with claws or what have you.
Well, even D&D has, Cat's Grace, Eagle Splendor, and all those other
Yep.
kind of enhancement spells that have been around for a while. But also elemental powers.
Certainly.
So lightning, wind, water, fire, wind, all that sort of thing. I was going to do it.
I knew you couldn't resist.
I can never resist a reference to Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
Any of the elements would be great.
And they are things that are immediate and they directly impact the world with that immediacy.
Now, we didn't mention this in religion, but fire was definitely worshipped at some point. I mean, it's a weapon. You can cook with it.
It's a living thing that you have to take care of.
You have to tend it. Yeah. So that magic also might play into your storyline as well.
Makes
And
sense.
also stuff with the sun and moon. So any type of celestial stuff. We've always been star creatures.
Yeah.
Staring up at the stars. At least before, all the cities got built and we can't see them anymore. What kind of politics would a Stone Age, age of discovery, age of creation civilization have?
Most likely, and from what we can tell, either the strongest or the best provider was the person in charge.
And that's pretty much all we know.
Yep.
So Thog is the best hunter. Thog is in charge.
There we go.
Thog is the strongest. He beats people over the head. Thog is in charge. Now, that seems a bit limiting in a game, because remember, we're playing a game.
Sure.
This is just the realities that we know about.
But it is and it's not.
And most civilizations are far more complex than that. Humans are more complex than that. So think of familial types of interactions.
Sure. Right.
Matriarchies.
Yep.
Or actually, probably matriarchies would probably be very big.
Absolutely.
You could think of reverence towards elders, because Thog has stuck around long enough. Thog is 30 years old. He's an elder.
Indeed.
Right? That's something that's impressive. If you can stick around long enough when there's giant cave bears wanting to tear you limb from limb, then guess what? Thog's a boss.
Yeah.
Because he knows a lot more than you do about cave bears. See half of his arm is gnawed off? He survived that.
And that's a big deal.
That's a big deal, right? Thog knows where to find food. So elders deference to elders might be useful. What else could there be?
You might, in fact, have the burden of power split into multiple ways, right? If Thog's the best hunter, then Thog's in charge of the hunters.
Mm-hmm.
But if Grandma's the best cook, guess who deals with the food when it gets back?
Yeah. And maybe the dispersal of food as well.
Sure. So it might be the beginnings of the person best suited to the job determines how the job goes.
So very meritocracy type orientation.
Indeed.
Yep. Again, all of these are just different types of tropes and themes that you can use. Now, speaking of themes and tropes, what are some themes and tropes we have?
Well, for the Stone Age, survival, obviously a big theme.
Dinosaurs. I know people didn't roll with dinosaurs, but dinosaurs. Or giant megafauna of any type. And if you guys don't know what we're talking about, go see our megafauna episode.
You can also look up the original unicorns.
Or animals of the Eocene. Giant sloths, guys. Giant sloths were around.
Have you seen the unicorns?
No.
The Indian unicorns?
No.
Oh, terrifying much? Imagine it kind of like a woolly rhinoceros.
Oh.
But with a head horn as opposed to the snout horn like a rhinoceros.
Yeah, that sounds frightening to me.
Yes. And it was around when people were around.
Woolly mammoths, we know they were around back in the day.
Yeah.
Before we ate them. Other
giant sloths.
Giant sloths. Yeah. All
Which
kinds of stuff.
do not be confused. While, yes, they are related to current sloths, they were neither as kind nor as gentle as the current adorable little critters.
While we're on the subject of beasties, let's talk about some magical beasties that you might be fighting for survival in.
Dire critters are the obvious
dire
go-to.
Anything. Yeah. Dire crocodiles.
Everything.
Throw some fur on it, make the teeth bigger, some armor plates or something. You got dire something. Dire were sharks.
Yeah. Dire parrot.
A dire parrot? Yeah. Well, they had, what is it called? The terror birds back in the day?
Yeah.
Now, granted, I think those were dead before humanity came about, but who cares?
Right.
Throw a terror bird in there.
If nothing else, just look up a cassowary.
Yeah. Dinosaurs of all stripes. And any of the elemental monsters from the world's beginning. So dragons.
Sure.
These dragons have been around forever. Any type of elementals.
They could certainly still be around. Fae.
Oh, yeah. In the beginning of the world, there could be all kinds of fae. Proto-gods.
Imagine primal fae. Like, what if the connection to the world is tied to how they present on the world?
That's boss.
That would be really cool.
We mentioned I mentioned proto-gods.
Sure.
So maybe the beginnings, like powerful animus spirits or anima spirits.
There's a lot of things you could play with there.
All kinds of stuff. What are some other fun tropes we could do?
Oh, aboleths.
Absolutely. They were there in the beginning of the world.
Yep.
Aboleths.
Well, one of the main themes is people versus nature. I mean, that's the whole story of the Stone Age.
So we got survival against monsters or survival against just nature itself, people against nature, maybe taming the wilderness a little bit.
Yeah.
Or finding your place in it. That'd be another good one.
Yeah. Traveling.
Traveling is another one, getting from one place to the other. Now, we're looking at this, if you have like a top-down view in your mind, of a small village. And the rest of the world, here be dragons or aboleths.
Right.
And that is the age of creation. You might have an entire game session in a valley.
Sure.
And the entire quest is to get outside the valley and go explore. And that's dangerous if you've only you come from there's only like 15 people that you know in the world. What's out there? Could be anything. Why would we want to play a game in the Stone Age? What's awesome about this?
So, I have a plan that I like. If I were going to create a world, I would run a one-shot or a very short campaign that starts in the Stone Age.
Okay.
And who those people are and the decisions they make determine the prehistory of the world.
So you build the world by playing the one-shot.
Exactly.
That's a great idea.
And then you do a one-shot later and a one-shot later. And so
building more on the timeline and building the different ages of the world until you get to the main storyline.
Yes.
There you have it. We just wrote a book, guys. We're going to write that down. Someone's probably already done it. Another really awesome reason to play a game in the Stone Age. Again, dinosaurs.
Sure.
Fighting beasties that you don't see every day. And for storytellers, why would you play a Stone Age campaign? I'll tell you, if you start off with a village, you can build the rest of the world at your leisure. You don't have to feel pressure to come up with just an entire continent full of stuff.
Right. The world literally doesn't know what's over the next hill. So you don't have to until your players are preparing to go over the next hill.
Yeah. Well, what is it? Mystic Oddities of Theros.
Right.
The world's like this big. You know what I mean? Like there's only like a couple of different islands and stuff like that. And after that, the edge of the world literally exists because you're this is the Age of Heroes, but you're in the Age of Heroes and that's it. That's all of the world. Yeah. There's nothing else.
It hasn't been explored yet.
So you can take that type of storytelling concept and be like, well, if you go past that village, that's it. Yeah. There's nothing else.
It's wilderness forever.
Yeah. It's just forever. Or that's the dead.
Right.
Like that's where everybody, like you walk off far enough, you go into the land of the dead and now there's no more world. Or maybe as humanity grows, the world expands. Or as the storyteller gets more written, the
Yeah.
world expands. So that's another great reason to play a Stone Age or Age of Creation campaign.
Sure.
Now let's talk about,
The Agrarian Age.
okay, what's the Agrarian Age?
Well, first off, it's not a real age. It's kind of an age that I made up to separate from Stone Age to Bronze Age,
Okay.
because there's a great deal of difference between those two ages, and a lot happened from point A to point B there.
Okay. So this is just our delineation between those two.
Correct.
Okay. So it's not a proper age, but there are some things that we can recognize about this age.
Yeah. Well, first off,
Society.
you made the point that it's the age of myth, right?
Mhm.
It's the start of mythos.
So start of collected stories and start of collected myths.
Right. Talking about societies, extended families, small villages, group governance is basically a necessity at this point, and usually either a meritocracy or just a group, kind of like a democracy, right? Like the group is just like, you're going to take care of this.
Yeah. So you went from a series of families or just a family of people to, or even like a small town to a larger town,
Right.
or maybe a series of a couple of small towns. So we've gone outside just the valley. We might have a couple of valleys, valley and a plain, right?
Or now the entire valley is settled.
Yes. And so Here Be Dragons lies outside of all of that.
Yeah. It's across the pass.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. You gotta get over the mountain range, man. That's where the underworld is. Technology is going to be a little bit more advanced, obviously. So you've got the wood and stone stuff that you had before, but what else do we have?
Well, now you're going to have early tanning,
Okay, so you can finally skin some animals and make something out of them.
right? Wheels.
Ah, the wheel. Yes, the delightful wheel. It's round, carries things if you put stuff on it. Baskets.
Early pottery.
Mm-hmm. And stable shelter, which you wrote.
Indeed. And with a lot of those things is probably going to come very early domestication.
Okay, so this is why it's the Agrarian Age. So tending of wheat, tending of animals, maybe domestication of dogs.
Yeah, this is a point in history where wheat starts to domesticate us.
Mm-hmm. Cats certainly are domesticating us at this point.
Yes. Oh, I jumped ahead of myself. That's actually under sciences, not under.
What, cats
Technologies.
domesticating us?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that totally makes sense. Speaking of science,
Sure. Basic agriculture.
okay,
Obviously, it doesn't matter if something's growing if you have no idea how to tend it or what to do with it.
yeah, and identifying which ones you can grow in mass or in bulk.
Sure. Early animal husbandry,
Mhm.
as we mentioned, and basic astronomy.
So now we've been staring up at the stars for several millennia, and now we look up and say, that's the Big Dipper.
Right. Or at,
That's where the gods come from. Phil got struck by one last week.
yeah,
It was a big rock. It split his head open like a melon.
burning from the sky.
Burning from the sky. Yeah, that's how I want to go.
Sure.
I want to be struck by a meteorite as big as my fist. I want my head to burst asunder. I don't want to feel anything else. Just a smoking, charred corpse.
And you won't.
I better not. Because if I do after that, I'm going to be pissed. All right. So let's talk about, speaking of being struck from the sky by a god.
A nice unintentional segue.
That's how I do it.
So, religion.
Okay.
Now we've got many gods for many places.
Still could have some kind of animism, right? You
Oh,
could-
absolutely. Still going to have ancestor worship. But now you've got oral traditions that are starting to pin down creation beliefs of different people.
So people are asking questions at this point and saying,
Now they've got the spare time to.
yeah,
Take a field piece, for example, right? You got or string beans specifically. You've got to peel the strings off of them. You're sitting there with a giant basket.
got nothing else to do except
Yep.
peel some string beans. Got to
And-
tell some stories.
and talk, right.
Sure, I get that.
So, yeah, when you've got nothing but time, because part of agriculture is waiting,
You can tell a bunch of stories and make up stuff about the gods or explain what maybe not has been explained before.
Indeed.
Good times. What else do we have? We could do some basics of organized religion. What are some of the potential gods that you might have in an agrarian age, age of myth?
Well, almost definitely a god of weather.
Mm-hmm.
Because weather's
weather.
important.
Sure.
If you're in a floodplain, you're going to have a god of the river.
Yes.
Generally, the deities you have at this point are going to be based around the things that are important to the people in the area.
Might be a god of war, might be a god of death, might be a god of the sun.
Yeah. If you're in an area that has wildfires, that's going to be a god that you want to appease at all costs.
Yeah. So lots of different gods and goddesses rolling around.
Yeah.
And if you don't know which ones to make some up. There's generators out there that you can use, or again, you can just base them off of the activities that people are doing. In general,
you can also check out our custom Pantheon.
That is
episode.
Also true. Yes, I forgot about that. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. We're going to talk a little bit more about different types of things you can do in time periods, but we'll be right back
after these messages.
You with the face. Do you like what we have to say?
Help our channel rise from the depths like the mighty Godzilla.
Please like and subscribe and ring the bell and do all of the necessary YouTube.
What he said.
If there are any topics you would like us to cover, goods or services you would like us to review, or if you would like to sponsor an episode, we would love for you to contact us at info@goblinscorner.com. See you there. And we're back.
Welcome back.
Now we're talking about time periods, and we were just talking about the Agrarian Age, the Age of Myth.
Indeed.
And some different type of deities that you can toss into your campaign if you're playing in that time period. What are some other things that we can do in addition to religion?
Well, I think next up was art.
Okay. And which is obviously influenced by the religions.
It can be, very much.
Pottery, obviously.
Sure. And we have plenty of historical evidence that says that was an early art form.
We've got clothes because we have tanneries.
Yep.
Or at least tanning.
Right. And early dyes are as simple as using fruits or other flowers, what have you.
Painting still.
Yeah.
So whether
it never stops.
Yeah, it's never, and not just painting, tattoos.
Were they that early?
I believe so, yeah. I'm
Very
going to say that until someone corrects me.
Fair. Okay.
Storytelling because of oral traditions.
I think this is where storytelling goes from I did this today, or I saw someone do an amazing thing, to mythical storytelling and to making up stories and the theatrics of storytelling.
The explanation of fantastical events.
Yeah. So storytelling from this point on becomes a very important practice for humanity, or dwarfanity, or elfanity, however
Abolithanity.
Sure.
You know, aboliths have their own stories to tell. Speaking of monsters and such, let's talk a little bit about magic. Now, earlier we had the elemental style magic and the animalistic style magic, transformation and stuff like that. What kind of stuff do we have in the Agrarian Age?
First off, weather magic is going to be
still
super important.
Sure, because now now it's not just me getting out of the rain or having a nice day, but now I got to grow some crops.
Right.
So Druidism.
Sure. Curative magics, not just healing, but fixing someone that's sick. Or someone who's been poisoned. Some stuff like that. I think you move from immediate health to longer term health cures.
I see.
Divine magic begins to crop up because now we've got dedicated deities.
Yeah. Well, you got a water witch as well. Got to find where that water is to dig a well. You might have to divine the best place to grow some crops. Look for omens, entrails, and such.
I think you're also probably going to have plant and animal magic.
Very true.
because it's probably easier to domesticate an animal. Like if you're, how they used to break horses. Well, they had to get them someplace to break them. But if you could just charm it to get it back, then that's taken care of.
And at this point, you might have arcane magic as well. So beforehand, you had divine stuff going around because it's just all magic came from the gods or someone was gifted with this. And now I figured this out.
Right.
It is my magic. And that could be druidcraft or it could be arcane stuff.
I agree.
Warlocks, perhaps.
I think before, any arcane style magic probably would have been sorcery based, right? It was somebody who was born with it.
Thog slept with the dragon. Thog's son.
Hey, look, man.
Understands all about. Thog's son understands all about fire breathing magic.
Indeed. Now you're going to have enough things out in the universe that are interested enough that maybe people can start making deals.
Mm-hmm. Start experimenting a little bit.
And then, once people see magic in action, they're going to want to start trying to pick it apart and figure out how it works for themselves. Because maybe they don't want to cut deals.
Yeah, maybe they want to just take things. And speaking of which...
Politics.
Well, yes. I was also thinking adventuring.
Oh.
This is the basics of adventuring right here.
Sure.
Now, you could adventure before in the Stone Age, but it was more of like an individual thing. Now, this is where the mythological adventurers come from.
Yep, this is the early times for it.
And speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about monsters. What kind of monsters are we dealing with in the Age of Myth? I'm thinking huge mythical beasts like the Leviathan.
Okay, I get krakens.
Oh, totally. Dragons still.
Sure.
Elemental lords still.
Sure.
Archfey still? Or have they retreated to the world at this point?
I don't think so.
They would have retreated in the Bronze Age.
I think their retreat actually happens at the start of the Iron Age.
Oh, so after the Bronze Age, they retreat into the world. I see. That makes sense too.
Because traditionally, Fey and Iron, not the best of friends.
That's a good point. Yeah, they don't really care much about bronze, but iron really kind of sticks in their craw.
Literally and figuratively.
Yes. All sorts of Eldritch Horrors would abound. Cthulhu, Beholders, what have you. I'm thinking if it's a beast, make it big and nasty. I would almost say make them archetypical beasts. So it's not just a saber-toothed tiger, it's the saber-toothed tiger.
Sure.
It's not just a dragon, it's the dragon.
Yeah. It's the dire gorilla. If you hunt animals on a regular basis, the only interesting animal is the apex version of that animal.
Mm-hmm.
And so if adventurers are going out, they're going out after this thing, which is the terror in the night or the unstoppable force, right? Because if it's just a regular version of the critter, any hunter could take care of it.
So think of the monsters as storylines waiting to happen. You kill this. What happens because you've killed this beast or encountered this beast? If you killed the bear and the bear dies, maybe the bones of the bear become a mountain or open up more land for people to settle. Like there's always some kind of story with that. And by his bones, he split the rivers and became, they became two continents or some ridiculousness like that. That's because it's myth.
Yeah. It could also be how, if you're playing D&D, how the path of the bear barbarian.
Oh, the beginnings of the different barbarian lodges and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So a lot of cool stuff with that. You mentioned politics.
Oh, yeah. I think this is really where the politics begins to start.
I'm guessing might makes right still.
Sure. So you're going to have warlords. You're also, in some places, you'll just have councils.
Mm-hmm.
Right? A meritocracy that everybody handles what they're best at and one person gets a final decision. It might just be whoever's oldest.
Yeah, or who's just loud enough and makes the decisions.
That's oftentimes been the way a leader is chosen.
Cranky the bread maker is the crankiest bread maker around, but he makes bread and everybody loves him for it, even if he is cranky. He's very loud. And so we just kind of follow along with what Cranky says because he generally makes sense. He's got lots of time on his hands while he's kneading dough.
And he's the guy who's figured out yeast.
That's a good point, yeah. It could be unleavened bread.
It could be. But bread gets better when it's yeasty.
That's true. You mentioned themes. What are some themes we can play with in the Age of Myth?
Well, obviously you're going to have nature and cycles as themes.
Absolutely.
You're going to have, honestly, resource management.
What do you mean by resource management?
Because you're going to have good years, bad years. You're going to have seasons where things aren't growing. That's this is the first time where rather than moving to a place that has the resources, people are going to have to gather the resources to last through a season. And so because of that, you can play with those themes. You can play with the start of seasonal celebrations and things
holidays
like that.
And such.
Yeah.
Sure. We've also got different types of defense. So maybe building, fortifying a home or barriers to keep monsters out.
Absolutely.
We mentioned the beginning of adventurers.
Yep.
And while they can exist in the previous age, this is like, you want to make a name for yourself? This is it right here.
Yeah, this is the beginning of not just reputation with your family, but reputation with your people.
Mm-hmm. So what's awesome about running a game in the Agrarian Age?
I like that you're at the edge of civilization, right? We haven't gone into full countries and kingdoms and things like that. And you could very easily, as a group of adventurers, become the people in charge and steer the next stage of development in the game world.
So we're looking at the top-down version again. We've gone a little bit wider. We now have a little bit more geographic area in our heads to play with. There's still here be dragons out here, but you might have a river and a valley and a mountain. There's a lot more that you can mess around with and really enrich the game world. Create those myths.
The other thing you can do, as in the Agrarian Age, is the start, the very cusp, the start of trade. Imagine all of a sudden someone you don't know from a family you don't know shows up at your village. This is proof of the existence of people outside of your people.
Mm-hmm.
This is huge. This is literally world changing.
You might have different societies at this point.
Yeah.
And what happens with that? Well, war. Or trade,
Yeah.
but probably war. All right. Now, finally, for this episode at least, we come to the Bronze Age.
Indeed.
This is the Age of Heroes or the Age of Empires. Why do we call it the Age of Heroes or the Age of Empires? Sounded good.
Well, I mean, there's that, but it's also the birth of
Large-scale
empire
empires
building.
and stuff. Yeah.
And usually in those events, people make names for themselves that make them known across the empire.
Mm-hmm. So we've had the time of myth. Now we have the time of heroes.
Indeed.
We've gone from, using like a D&D term, the proto-gods to the gods to demigods.
Indeed.
In many ways.
Yeah. Oftentimes people who were amazing at what they did, that amazingness was attributed to a god looking out for them or them being the child of a god.
Or they might actually have been the child of the god.
That's fair.
Let's talk about some of the technology because now we have, because it's the Bronze Age, metalworking.
Oh, that's the largest hallmark of the Bronze Age is bronze, obviously. But that allows for advancements of all of the other things, right? Now we've got stone carving and mining because now we have tools that we can mine with.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of mining and working with rock, cement.
Yes, indeed. And in some cases, cement that we've only just figured out how to make. Most importantly, as far as sadly the human world is concerned,
Weapons.
the advent of actual weapons.
Now, this is, I find very interesting because, and I've heard your theories before about this, because the previous 2 ages had things that could kill you, but
That's not what they were designed for. They
Right.
weren't designed for stabbing people.
so let's explain that just a tad more.
Okay. So an axe is designed to chop down trees.
Yes.
It's designed to split firewood and what have you. It's not designed solely for the purpose of stabbing thag.
So it's a tool
That can be used as a
can
weapon.
kill you. Okay.
A spear was used for hunting.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tool that can be used as a weapon. Bow and arrow, same thing. It was used for hunting first. We happen to work out that it's good for killing that guy over there.
Yeah. But now you've got specific tools which are designed just to kill people.
The sword.
There you go.
There you go. We have worked out better ways to murder each other.
Now-
Team humanity.
Now, in addition to weapons of war, we also have stuff like weapons of trade.
Indeed.
So
Seafaring.
ships. The fact that you can just rock a boat now, go trade with somebody else, that's a huge thing.
Yeah. And the baseline navigation, like learning navigation that comes with that.
Speaking of learning, vellum, paper, all were invented around this time.
And cartography.
Yes, because you have to make some maps if you're going to be sailing the ocean, or if you're going to just hit the next rise, make a quick sketch, you know how to get home. Here be dragons over there.
Well,
But over there, that's a Best Western. You know?
I mean, literally, without a map, when you leave the dock, do you go east or west?
Mm-hmm.
You need to know the answer to that question.
It's very important. Get shanked, or you could get something to eat.
Rich.
Yeah, you get rich, you get shanked. Speaking of all of our technology, let's talk about some sciences.
Now we have worked out that we're in a solar system, if you will. Now, we haven't necessarily worked out whether or not,
Or a crystal sphere, or another dimension, another dimension, another dimension.
sure, we know there's more than one celestial object
Yes.
other than the moon and the sun, right? Sure, the stars are up there, but they're whatever they are. But we've worked out that there are other things. So, obviously, the other planets.
So we've got some astronomy going on.
Exactly.
We mentioned being able to rock a boat. So if you can rock a boat, you got to navigate. Navigation.
Yeah.
Cartography.
We mentioned tablets, vellum, and paper. That must mean we've got
Some kind
writing.
of, yeah. Unless you're using clay tablets, in which case it might be something like cuneiform or something like that.
Which is still another form of
Still
writing.
another form of writing, just using different medium.
Yep.
We've got medicine at this point, codified, as opposed to just grabbing some plants and mushing them into people's faces.
Right. Well, that didn't kill him. Let's see if he gets better. He got better.
Yeah, Granny knew how to heal this person for ages, but now some asshole wrote it down, and now it's in a book.
Yes. We've got the beginnings of advanced math.
Math.
In this case, we're talking useful math. Things, and I know there are going to be people out there, all math is useful. I believe you.
They're going to tell us the answer why it is, but none of
Right.
us except mathematicians will understand it.
Right. Functional math. How
Yes.
about that?
Yes. Architecture as well, because
Yes.
you've been building buildings for a little bit. Now you build better buildings using math.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. Speaking of buildings that you would build, you most likely would build stuff for religious purposes because now you have temples,
Yes.
organized pantheons.
because gods are important and they need a house too. And
Sure.
their house should be fancy.
They got the fanciest house a lot of times, usually to the detriment of others.
Usually.
We've got the beginnings of philosophies as well.
Sure.
And it should be noted, not just like a hierarchical set of gods and goddesses and what have you, but also we're still rocking elemental lords that people pray to. You could have dragons. You could have animism going on. You could have all the varied other things that people will get religious about.
Yeah. Uncle Aboleth is still alive.
He's still pissed because you've grown this world now. And he's like, I just remember when it was all under the sea.
It's true. Although Uncle Aboleth could also have the status of a deity and just be chilling at all times. Because people literally will toss sacrifices to him or what have you. He doesn't have to do anything.
He waits till Tuesday. It's like Uber Eats.
Yeah.
On Tuesday, the sacrifice gets thrown overboard and he feasts.
It's not all bad being an Aboleth.
Not all bad. Not all the time. We'll make a t-shirt. It's not all bad being an Aboleth. Let's talk a little bit about some art. So painting's still been around.
Sure. Sculpture.
Yeah, well, now we can really work some stone. So we've got some sculpture, and we had some before too. But because of books.
Literature.
Yeah, because not just oral history anymore. Now we're writing the stuff down.
And because we're writing stuff down, poetry.
Oh, yeah. Because we have concrete now, frescoes.
Indeed. And mosaics, because you've got to have concrete to set those little tiles in place.
You got to have some mortar to set that stuff. Getting fancy now up in this. Magic. Let's talk about the magic.
All right. So since we're developing philosophies, the arcane magic would probably develop philosophies also and begin splitting off into schools.
So we've gone from practicing magic to formalizing the practice.
Indeed. Like we've been formalizing the practice of everything, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Divine magic is going to separate by deity.
Very true.
And druidic circles will probably start to specifically specialize and separate into their individual circles.
Sorcerers and warlocks, of course, still doing their thing, rocking about.
Yeah. Bards, still barding.
Still barding.
Actually, this would probably be the time of the birth of bard universities.
Oh, yeah. The bardic colleges and such. Yeah. Because before that, they might have just been the bard of the town.
Yeah.
Who's that guy? He's the bard. What's he do? He keeps all the stories in his head and he tells them to us. And now, like, at this point, you go to a college to learn all those stories that everybody has been telling for thousands of years.
Yeah. Let's talk monsters.
All right. So we've talked about magic, monsters. I'm thinking because in the age of myth, we had just the archetypical creatures. You could still have those as well.
Sure.
Because there's definitely, just from stories in history, like the Roman gods and goddesses, their Greek mythos and stuff like that, there was always like the prototype, like the Medusa is a good example of that. So you have those archetypical creatures, but there's more of the lesser archetypes now.
Well, this is going to be the time period for the birth of chimeras.
Yes. So we've got chimeras is definitely something that you would see. So it's not just the epitome of the giant crow that forms a mountain. Now you've got a crow-like creature like the rock.
Sure. You're going to have literal chimeras, like the creature, the chimera.
Yep.
You're going to have griffins.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have
centaurs.
Centaurs, sure. All of the half and half critters, this is the time they were born in.
Monsters and beasties of the ocean, of course.
Absolutely. But now we're seafaring. Now we've got things to be scared of out there.
Oh, yeah. Dragon turtles and dragons and, well, kraken, of course.
Sure. Got to have a kraken.
Got to have a kraken just at least once in a while. Still have the creatures of the forest.
This is the last crowning glory of time of the Fae.
So there's still parts of the world where the other dimensions are bleeding through. You might even have places where the land of the dead still exists.
Sure. You might have a literal curtain or doorway at some point that you can physically walk through to get to some of these places.
Go down a particular cave, you're in hell. Just straight up. It's right there. You can walk to it.
Just bring your instrument.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about politics.
All right. So we're still going to have warlords, obviously. We will always have warlords. We still have them.
But now we have codified warlords.
Yep. This is the birth of feudalism. It's the birth of standing armies and all that entails. Codified law systems.
Nation states.
Nations,
for that matter.
Yeah.
And empires.
And in some cases, democracies.
Yeah.
And all manner of humans trying to figure out how to rule larger groups of humans.
Yep.
Whether by force or by governance and law and what have you. So politics gets busy around this time.
A lot of intrigue going on as well because of the politics. Speaking of intrigue and such, that's one of the themes we have.
Sure.
So we can talk about, obviously, intrigue and politics is a theme, a common theme.
Yep.
Whether you're murdering a senator or murdering somebody in a back alley, intrigue still happens.
Oh, yeah. Just civilization as a theme, right? This is an amazing time because we still remember a couple of generations ago when this thriving city was a village. So,
and the gods of the city, in addition to like the ancestor worship and stuff like that, there are literal deities of particular cities, which is kind of interesting exploring that.
Like Athena for Athens.
Sure. The birthplace of nationalism.
Yep. You've got nations now.
And
got to be proud of where you're from. It's also the birth of learning and learning institutions.
And art.
And art institutions.
Yeah. So a lot of really big city building themes that you can explore in your campaign. And again, this is the age of heroes. So armies or making it big, making a name for yourself is a huge one.
Sure.
And
glory.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Glory.
Glory is the concept of glory or the concept of, a glorious battle or glorious death. Those types of interesting story arcs now you can explore. I mean, again, D&D had a whole game based off of Theros, right?
Right.
It's all about that. Go look it up.
Renown, reputation. There's all of this is still relatively new because this is the first time where there was enough civilization for your reputation to precede you to somewhere else.
And it's still young enough in the birthplace of the world where here be dragons, so exploration still exists. Go out there, find something, make a name for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
That's a huge theme. And what fun it is for players to do that as well, to become big heroes and stuff like that.
And a lot of games say that exploration is important to the game. Very few of them deliver well on that. I think that's partially because it is difficult to mechanically do that. Exploration is largely the job of the storyteller.
Yes.
And the players. If you strike off, if you're asking about the world as a player and you say, what's to the west? And the storyteller tells you, no one knows. There is no map there. I'm going.
Yeah.
Hell or high what, nothing will stop me.
I'm going to bring my newly invented map making tools. I'm going to drag the scruffy looking guy that looks like he draws maps, and we're going off. We're going to fight, kill some things, and he's going to draw it all.
That could be a great campaign in and of itself. Is literally you are the bodyguards for a noble cartographer.
Yeah. You go out there, you kill some things, they draw the maps, come back, here's what's out there.
Yeah. And the killing the things isn't the goal. It is just the necessity to do what it is you're attempting to accomplish.
The knowledge.
Right.
Yeah, figuring out what's out there.
But when you come to villages and things like that, you're gaining renown because you're bringing this giant dire lion head with you or what have you. And your cartographer already has a reputation.
Yeah. This thing's an ant keg.
Right. And so all of a sudden you're building a name for yourself, and maybe you're solving problems for villages that didn't necessarily contract you to do it, but the problem's solved. And they're like, hey, that's been a generational issue with us.
Yeah.
Here's 100 gold. Here's 1,000 gold, whatever's reasonable for the And so that, to me, I'm skipping ahead slightly, but that's one of the awesome things about running a game in the Bronze Age.
Well, and if you look at it from, again, from the top-down view, we've gone from a small group of families in a small, or maybe even a small village, to series of villages or even a valley. And now we're talking about potentially an entire continent or a series of nations.
Yeah.
And what's awesome about playing in this game, it's a perfect time to explore, to battle, to get into intrigue. I mean, this is the quintessential fantasy game, the beginnings of it. Without anything else, you can get into some trouble and have some fun, go find some stuff, make renown, kill some monsters, get some fat loot, all that stuff.
You could be Perseus. You could be Heracles.
You absolutely could, or anybody you want.
Yep.
So there you have it. 3 different time periods that you can use for your game. And again, feel free to mix and match these themes out and about. If you want to have a Age of Agrarian with Bronze Age weapons, do it. It's totally doable.
If you want to have a Stone Age setting, but in a civilized size game, why not?
Why not?
Yeah, that's the Flintstones,
Make
right?
it, make it interesting, right? Did we miss something? Yes.
Certainly.
There's not even a question this time. If it's something that we missed that you would like us to light upon, write to us. info@goblinscorner.com, or you can reach me, Eric@goblinscorner.com, or
me, Matt at goblinscorner.com.
We're on all of the things. We have a Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube, and Twitch, which is
Goblins Corner, and then Instagram at The Goblins Corner.
Do you like our show? Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player, YouTube, and Twitch.
Click at the 5 stars, give us a review on iTunes or Podchase or YouTube, boost our show, feed the algorithm, and hopefully get us in front of more people.
Yeah, get us out there so that everybody else can make some more awesome stories so that we can talk about it.
Indeed.
That's all the time we have for tonight. Once again, my name is Eric.
And I'm Matt.
We'll see you next time.
Good night, folks.
The Goblins Corner has been written and produced by Eric Holden and Matt Staples.
Music by D20.
This is a Subterranean production.